2 years ago, a woman named Suzanne Timms was scrolling through Facebook and came across an image of a missing Jane Doe that had been found in the state of Oregon that stopped her in her tracks. She said it was like looking into the mirror, a splitting image of herself. She has obviously a moment of realization that it's not her, but that of her mother's face. Her mom, Patricia Otto, who had gone missing 45 years earlier. She then read that this Jane Doe had a description being 17 to 25 years old, sandy brown hair, height 5'1" to 5'4", and she was wearing red pants and a white shirt and was found approximately 2 years after her mother was never heard from again. She read that 2 hunters stumbled upon this Jane Doe's remains in the forest, and to make the situation even stranger, she reads the names of the hunters, and it turns out that it was her husband's father who had found the skeletal remains that day. Hello everyone, and welcome to Lost and Found the Missing. I'm your host, Sarah Janik, Medium. Here we cover all types of missing persons cases. I connect those on the other side and have a pull towards those that have gone missing and want to help raise awareness around missing persons cases. The more people know about these cases, the higher likelihood that someone may recognize a missing person, leading to their safe return. Public attention can generate tips and leads that law enforcement might not have access to otherwise. Sometimes the seemingly insignificant detail shared by the public can break a case wide open. It also puts a human face to a statistic. It reminds us that each missing person is an individual with a story, loved ones, and the right to be found. Side note, there was a missing persons homicide case here in my own hometown that was just solved after 4 decades. The reason I bring this up is because today's case has sadly been open for that long. 47 long years. Patricia Otto was last seen on August 31st of 1976 in Lewiston, Idaho. Patty was born August 4th of 1952. She was 5'3" and 140 pounds with blonde hair and hazel eyes and was known to be wearing a white top with red slacks the night she was last seen. Patty was married to Ralph Otto, and together they had 2 daughters, Natalie, age 5, and Suzanne, age 3. She had reportedly gotten into an argument with her husband, Ralph, and decided to leave home without her children. Natalie and Patty were told by their father that their mom left and had decided to go off with another man and that she would sadly not be returning home. Natalie and Patty, however, held on to hope, praying that their mother would one day return home. Suzanne and her sister remember a very different situation than the night their mother supposedly left. Suzanne said she heard yelling and things crashing down, a ruckus happening upstairs, and she goes and looks around the corner of the stairs and sees her parents fighting. She reports seeing them in a verbal and physical altercation. She then sees her father put his hands around her mother's neck, and he then drags her off. That was the last time that Patricia Otto was seen.
For more than 40 years, Suzanne Timms believed her mother, Patricia Otto, had left her family for another man in 1976 when she was just 3 years old. But she was haunted by a fight she'd seen between her parents the last night she ever saw her mother.
I was scared because I could hear upstairs there was crashing and sounds and yelling, and my sister's 5 and I'm 3. And I'm curious, so I crept up the stairs, and my mom and dad were having a physical and verbal fight, and my mom hit him in the face and my dad hit her back, and then he put his hands around her neck, pushed her up against the wall, and drug her out of my sight.
Her sister Natalie told her at the time her mom would come back, but her father, Ralph, said Patty was gone for good. He told family and police in Lewiston, Idaho, that his wife abandoned them. Police began an investigation.
Police began a missing persons investigation into her case, and during their thorough search of Patty and Ralph's home, he feels the police are harassing him and lets his friend know this at the local bar. Ralph was 18 years her senior and was known to have a bit of a drinking problem. He frequented a local bar, and one night while he was out drinking, sitting next to a man telling him all about being harassed by Captain Ayler of the police department about his wife having had gone missing. He was offered from a supposed hitman that he would get rid of the police officer, and so Ralph takes him up on it and pays the man to kill the police officer. Little did Ralph know he was paying an undercover cop. Just 2 months after his wife's disappearance, Ralph Otto was arrested and convicted of attempted murder of the lead detective in his wife's disappearance. However, a couple of years into his serving his time in 1982, he is released from prison because he decided to take his case to the Supreme Court, saying he was only trying to solicit for the cop's murder and that it wasn't actually truly attempted murder, so he was released, not being able to be tried again in this case. Ralph was arrested again for a different theft charge and put in jail and passed away in 1983, just 7 years after his wife's disappearance. The hunters come across a Jane Doe in Oregon. She was named the Finley Creek Jane Doe based on the location that she was found. She happened to be wearing red and white clothing, size 15 red pants, lace-up shoes, was thought to weigh between 115 and 140 pounds, and was thought to be 5'1" to 5'4", and she happened to be 6 months pregnant. The coroner also determined that she had been deceased for between 2 to 3 years, and investigators also found a 4-foot nylon cord and 2-foot long radio cord in her shallow 4-foot grave. Detectives identify Patty's missing persons case and know she was last seen wearing these same clothes, and she has a similar physical stature, so they quickly get a hold of Patty's parents and fly them out to identify her clothing. Her parents were able to identify her because of the clothing that they had actually seen her wearing the day that she disappeared back in August 31st of 1976, because she had actually gone to pick up her girls from her parents, who were watching the girls while she was taking an evening class wearing those same clothes. At the same time this is happening, the finding of the Finley Creek Jane Doe remains, Patty's dental records had been sent off to run her records against another Jane Doe who was also found in Oregon, not too far from Finley Creek. And about a week later, they are told that it wasn't a match with Patty's records. It's extremely important to note that these two Jane Does were found less than 30 days apart in Portland, Oregon. The first Jane Doe was found July 28th of 1978, and the Finley Creek Jane Doe was found August 27th of 1978. Reports later confirmed her dental imaging was ran against the July 28th Jane Doe, but never against the Finley Creek Jane Doe, whose remains matched those clothes that Patty had been wearing that night.
1978, while Ralph was serving his time, a woman's body was discovered buried in the woods in Portland, Oregon. The description of the body was similar to Patty's. Police in Lewiston sent Patty's dental records for comparison. But the day before those records were being prepared to go out, another body was discovered in Oregon at Finley Creek. Lewiston police were told Patty wasn't a match, but could her body have been that of the Finley Creek Jane Doe? The Finley Creek Jane Doe's identity remains in question even today and is also the subject of several Facebook posts.
Suzanne believes that the two Jane Does got mixed up along with the documentation, which seems to be lacking quite a bit because the two Jane Does were managed by different police offices, one being the Oregon State Police and the other being the local police department. This leaves a lot of questions unanswered as to how and when the parents were flown out to identify the remains, that Patty's records were never ran against that of the Jane Doe they believed to be their daughter. After Suzanne, Patty's daughter, comes across Jane Doe's photo on Facebook and saw that it was her father-in-law, one of the hunters who stumbled across the Jane Doe's remains that day, she calls him to confirm, and he was able to take her to the exact location and said that he remembered it like it was yesterday. It's said that some of the remains were never found due to disruption of the shallow grave from animals. Both hands, an arm, and a pelvic bone are still missing. So there is still a possibility that there is something left to be found that can help close this case for good. Suzanne's interest in the case has since increased activity around the Finley Creek Jane Doe's case. In August of 2022, the forensic state personnel responded by bringing in an excavation team because the cadaver dogs that were brought back out by the Finley Creek Jane Doe task force were noted to have picked up on some hits. However, the excavation team was unable to find any further remains. Without any movement in the case, the Oregon State Police closed the Finley Creek Jane Doe case in 1990 and unfortunately cremated her remains, leaving her remains being unable to be matched by any DNA, as there is no way to extract DNA from cremated remains. So unfortunately, unless there is some extra evidence to be found or somebody comes forward with some kind of witness account, this case looks like it may remain unsolved. Everyone working on the case back in 1978 is no longer working on the case or even around. Because her remains were cremated, they were unable to run her DNA against her daughter to confirm if this is or isn't Patty Otto. Since the cremation, her remains have been lost, no records were kept, and it is said that investigators completely lost track of all paperwork. Since there is no confirmation of a DNA match of Patty Otto's remains against the Finley Creek Jane Doe's remains, it has also been speculated that the remains of this specific Jane Doe could also be linked to the Green River Killer or the Lewis Valley Clark murders. Patty Otto went missing from her home in Lewiston, Idaho, and has yet to be found. Her daughter, Suzanne Timms, is actively working on trying to close her mother's missing persons case or link the Jane Doe case to her mom. If anyone has any information on Patty, call the Lewiston, Idaho Police Department at 1-208-746-0171. Never underestimate the ability of a tip to make a difference. All right, guys, thank you for joining me as we tune into the Patty Otto missing persons case. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button and subscribe to Lost and Found the Missing for more missing persons content. Remember to stay safe and look out for one another. Until next time, Sarah Janik Medium.